Tass in Baltimore. I don't bet on football. I don't know what else to say. An incredible afternoon of football if you are a Ravens fan and watching all things purple. Do it out in Oakland. Luke Jones now joins us. And Luke, I have not green roomed you. I have no idea what you're going to say. The first thing I would say is, wow, I don't think we expected that, right?
Yeah, I mean, a really good win, balanced. I mean, wasn't perfect, but a lot better than we've seen. Even going back to the first couple of weeks when they won, the offense, kind of did what it needed to do. I thought they played really well in the first half of the Cleveland game. Beyond that, they had run the ball well. They were opportunistic, but they hadn't really been the reason why they were winning. It was because the defense had forced 10 turnovers. We saw what happened in Jacksonville. We saw what happened last week against Pittsburgh. And for this Ravens offense to come out and right off the bat, first play of the game, a deep ball to Mike Wallace for 52 yards. Longest play of the year, just like that.
Dude, that's always a winner, right? It was Clayton in St. Louis, the day in Tampa with all the touchdowns. That first strike ability always forebodes a win to some degree, right? When that works, it really leads to some sort of momentum. And we've seen this over 10 years of Flacco's career.
Well, I mean, it's just, and it's not really unique to the Ravens or Flacco. It's a lot easier to win football games when you start fast and you get a lead. I mean, it's not rocket science. As difficult as the Ravens have made it look for most of this season, and even going back the last couple seasons with their offense not playing well, they were aggressive. They executed really well. I mean, I think the star of the game, as much as people will look at Mike Wallace having over 100 receiving yards, and Joe Flacco played really well, the offensive line was absolutely enormous. You can talk what you want about Derek Carr not being on the field for the Raiders, and yes, they were missing two of their top three corners, and you can kind of pick that apart and try to diminish what the Ravens did, but that front, knowing that Khalil Mack is the player that he is, one of the two or three best defensive players in this league probably, and to hold the Oakland Raiders to 0 sacks, only 2 quarterback hits on the afternoon. I mean, that is just a hell of a performance by the Ravens offensive line that we know has been ravaged by injuries, probably didn't have that great of a ceiling to begin with, even with Marshall Yanda in the picture. And for them to be as good as they were right off the bat, they give Joe Flacco time that he can throw a deep ball to Mike Wallace and then connect on another one and push the ball down the field a lot more than we've seen them do. It was huge to see that. But it really becomes much simpler when you start fast and you're not putting yourself in a hole and you're not going 3 and out and you're not starting to think about what happened against Pittsburgh last week and against Jacksonville 2 weeks ago. You change up the narrative. And
21-3 feels good.
Yeah, the Ravens did a really good job of changing up their mindset by going out there and starting fast and playing really well. And it wasn't perfect, and certainly there are things you can talk about that you want to try to clean up. But overall, I mean, you'll take that. I mean, as much as this team has been lackluster on the road, really since Super Bowl 47, let's call a spade, this was easily their most balanced, impressive win away from M&T Bank Stadium, probably since the 2014 playoff win at Pittsburgh. You'd have to go back almost 3 years now for them to play as well as they did on the road all the way around.
Well, certainly for a game of impact, and I don't mean Cleveland or playing a drag team. This is a pretty good football team in Oakland, and we could talk about the guys they didn't have and that it would have been a better effort, a more representative effort if Carr had been in there. But, it would have been a more representative effort for the Ravens last week if Marshall Yanda and Brandon Williams and Brent Urban were in there too. So, I mean, when you start to stack all that up, and the Ravens lost a couple more guys throughout the game as well, another one of those kind of games, I'll take that effort. I don't even know what to complain about. I mean, sure, I can nitpick a couple of things, some big plays defensively, like to see a little more pass. I got all that going on.
Sure.
But by and large, dude, this one tastes pretty good if they're getting on a plane and flying home 6 hours after that kind of effort. They're going to win a lot of football games if they play as well as they did on Sunday.
Sure. And just because they did this on Sunday doesn't mean this is who they are now any more than what they did the previous weeks. I mean, it's a week-to-week league. I mean, all you got to see is what happened in Pittsburgh on Sunday afternoon to be reminded of that. But this was a formula that works for them. And I mean, you can say what you want about Derek Carr. And look, I think the Raiders probably would have traded places as far as just the injury situation for 1 week to have their two-time Pro Bowl quarterback on the field. But E.J. Manuel wasn't the reason why they lost this football game. I didn't think he was great, but I didn't think he was disastrous by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, he didn't kick the ball around after he threw it, right?
Yeah, I thought the difference was that the Ravens' offensive line really dominated that Oakland front that's supposed to be pretty good and is. Khalil Mack is one of the best players in this league, and they did a terrific job with him. I mean, hats off to Austin Howard and Ronnie Stanley, regardless of which side Mack was lining up. I thought the Ravens did a nice job with their running backs and tight ends to provide a little bit of help in that regard. And it was just a great effort by that offensive line. And they lost Matt Skura over the course of the game. And I'm not that I necessarily think there's a big drop-off from him to Jermaine Illuminor, but it's just the latest challenge for that group, and we'll see how that develops moving forward. But it was just a really, really strong performance by the offensive line, and everything else kind of fell into place from there. We saw Joe Flacco look much more confident in the pocket. I thought at times, even when when the protection wasn't perfect, I thought he did a much better job stepping up in the pocket on a couple of occasions, which we haven't been seeing him do that effectively. I thought his pocket mobility was better. You and I have talked about that quite a bit.
And he got hit. He got hit, and hard. I mean, he got crunched up pretty early in the game and popped right back up and was slinging it. And look, when he throws a deep ball the way he did to open the game, well, that says that he's capable of throwing a deep ball at any point, right? And that's something that I think over the last 2 weeks we were questioning, fans were questioning, certainly maybe scouts were questioning, that can he still throw the ball over your head? He can.
Well, I mean, we know he has a strong arm. I mean, say what you want about how accurate his deep ball has been over the last few years, and I think that's something that is a fair critique. But they haven't consistently pushed the ball down the field really for a few years now. I mean, they've had their moments. Mike Wallace had his moments last year, especially the first half of last season. But, you just haven't seen them take those shots really since Torrey Smith was part of this team. You just haven't seen that nearly as much. So it was good to see them be aggressive. You need to have time to do that, though, and his offensive line afforded him that. And you just saw this team. They got a little too conservative, I thought, to begin the second half, but then they got settled in. They made some big third down conversions that allowed them to get some points, even if they weren't touchdowns per se. But then they got into the fourth quarter, they got into their 4-minute offense, and they were able to run the football. And we saw them do that very effectively against Cincinnati in Week 1 when they were afforded a lead because their defense was getting those takeaways. But it says something when you're able to run the football effectively when you know when the opposition knows you're going to do it. That takes something special there, and that's why player of this game is a group. It's the offensive line. I mean, again, you can point out Flacco played well, certainly. Mike Wallace certainly played well. They had some other guys come up with some big plays, some big conversions. Brashad Perriman, even saw a sighting with him converting on a third down pass to move the chains. But again, it all began with the offensive line. And as much as I've been and not just me, but many in town have been very critical of Marty Mornhinweg, much more aggressive play calling in the first half, and I thought that meant all the difference in the world for this Ravens team.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. And for those of you wondering, I'm actually at the home studio this week. It's the first football game I think I've missed on the road without my wife's illness, and I missed maybe 2 or 3 2 years ago because of that, that I can ever remember missing a road game in October. Certainly one in San Francisco, but we did adopt a new kitty. I want to give a tip of the cap to the folks out at Be More Humane. So that's kind of what we were doing this weekend and supporting our friends at Living Classrooms this weekend in their Maritime Magic Party. So not in Oakland, back this week, putting together some Ravens live shows for later on in the month, watching some baseball, and Luke and I are going to break up some baseball and break down some baseball and some Red Sox and some Yankees, amongst other things, as the weekend progresses here. But certainly the Ravens out in Oakland, Luke, we started to wonder if they had this in them, right? Like, if the offensive line could match up, if they were good enough, if it was too ragtag. Certainly we wondered about the running game and whether that was going to come back to life. And then the protection for Flacco and whether Perryman was ever going to catch a first down pass or something like that. So, the sky was really falling around here the last 2 weeks, and I'm not a reactionary guy. I've been at this 22 years. I've taken every crazy phone call on a Monday, every praise phone call on a Friday, and everything in between. I really did, over the last 2 weeks, from London into Pittsburgh, given the injuries, given where this is, given how Flacco had looked, I did not expect this at all. This was a wild, wild scenario for me because it looked to be outside the character of what we thought they could do.
Yeah, again, those issues that we've talked about are still there. One performance doesn't change that, but I think this is just one of those performances. This is a stop the bleeding kind of performance that makes you feel good. As terrible as the performance was in London, which, by the way, the Jacksonville Jaguars, maybe you're feeling not so bad about that one anymore. Based on what they did against Pittsburgh.
Dude, this is a total Jekyll and Hyde league, though, man.
It is.
I don't even know what to make of any of these teams. And I guess that makes it fun. I don't necessarily want the big bad Patriots in my league, right? Or that sort of gorilla in the league. But this is kind of fun. The Jets have gotten 3 wins. They're in first place. What's going on around here, right?
Well, exactly. You can talk parity, mediocrity, whatever it is.
The Bengals are on a 2-game winning streak.
Yeah, the Bengals, they fire their offense coordinator and suddenly they start to have a little bit of life, although they still have their flaws. But, with the Ravens, you just kind of said it. I picked Oakland to win this game, full disclosure, and I wasn't alone in that. I know many people share those sentiments. I didn't think it was outside the realm of possibility that they could win. I just didn't think they'd be scoring 30 points because the way that this offense had performed, how are they going to score points? That's what until you start to do it, you're going to be skeptical. So it's not as though that everything's fixed and all is well now, and that they're going to go 13-3, but it gives you some confidence. And Joe Flacco talked about that after the game. I think this one, considering it's Week 5, and no, it wasn't must-win, but I think a lot of people looked at how the schedule shaped up early in the season, starting out with a road game at Cincinnati, knowing you had to go to London in Week 3, and the Ravens had never done that, and knowing what kind of challenge could possibly present. Then coming home, playing Pittsburgh on what could almost feel like a short week because of the time change, readjustment, and then going out to Oakland. Now, it worked out that Derek Carr didn't play, but that said, I think everyone looked at those first 5 games and thought, you know what, if this team can be 3-2, I think they're in pretty good shape then. Yeah, you'd like to be better, sure. You'd love to be sitting there at 5-0, but that's just not reality in the NFL. Undefeated teams you can't expect that. So they're at 3-2 now. As much as last week was a disappointment, this week makes up for that, and you're back to having a winning record. You come home now, and I think you look at this these next 3-4 games. This is a very reasonable schedule. You don't want to say that they're gimme wins because
you're not going to go out to Minnesota, just crawl in there and they're going to roll the ball at noon, but you got a chance. They're not in over their head. And hey, dude, that's part of the whole parody of all of this. If we're going to see the Packers, right? They're the flavor of the week now, and everybody will be into the power rankings. And all the home teams got their butts kicked this weekend, from Dallas to Los Angeles to Pittsburgh, straight on through. But I look at this schedule and I see that North Division over in the NFC, and knowing that we're going to be seeing those teams and a couple of them coming up here, I'll take my chances with the Bears and the Vikings right now. Hell, I'll take my chances with the Titans right now. That looked like a tougher game than what it looks to be at this point, and the Titans can't stop a nosebleed defensively right now.
Yeah, it's one thing for them not to have Marcus Mariota, but their issues defensively have certainly been pretty eye-opening. But I think the big thing with the Ravens, knowing how, let's face it, they've been bad on the road for the most part since their Super Bowl win. Early on in the John Harbaugh tenure, they were okay on the road. They were right around a 500 team on the road, give or take a game or two. And typically that's the formula. If you're a really good home team, if you can just go 500 on the road that's typically a formula that's going to add up to being right there for a playoff spot. But the Ravens haven't been that for the most part, other than 2014 since their Super Bowl win. So you go on the road, and I know it's E.J. Manuel. I know that they were missing their starting right guard, Gabe Jackson. I know they were missing 2 of their top 3 corners. But that said, I think most people look at this Oakland team and say the talent level is above average, even with some of those losses that they were trying to endure in Week 5. I think everyone looked at that team and say, hey, they're a team that, if there's any team that can challenge New England going into the season, that was a team you pointed to.
This was supposed to be the toughest game of the year, right? Maybe outside of Green Bay, going to Pittsburgh's never fun, but this was one of those ones where you just looked at it and said, they're probably going to lose that game 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, and again, that was also with the assumption that Derek Carr was going to play. I mean, I think we need to remember that. But as we noted a few minutes ago, I mean, E.J. Manuel wasn't really the big reason why they lost. Now, would Derek Carr have made another play? Would he have hit Crabtree in the end zone there, or whereas Manuel overthrew him a little bit? Or I guess Crabtree actually kind of stumbled.
Tripped,
so
yeah.
I mean, would that throw have been a little bit better? I don't know. Maybe the timing's a little bit off with those two. Who knows? I mean, we're talking about something that didn't happen. It's not the Ravens' fault that Derek Carr's hurt. So
by the way, Crabtree made a big boy play on that drive too, didn't he? I mean, wow, right? That reach for the I mean, that's kind of play that keeps you in a game, and it certainly kept them in the game at the time.
Sure. I mean, the Ravens, they got some play. I mean, as much as the defense, early on they struggled to stop the run. They gave up 17 points. I mean, the reality is this is what the Ravens need. They need their offense to be, at worst, functional, and they need to have some performances like they had on Sunday. I mean, you can't be a team you cannot think that you're going to be able to win games 13-10 consistently. Your offense has to be functional. It's just too difficult to do that. It's too difficult to expect your defense to be perfect. Especially when they're lacking a Brandon Williams, especially when they lose a Brent Urban a couple weeks ago, when they lose a Carl Davis over the course of Sunday's game. So, they made some plays when they needed to. Certainly they got the big fumble with Owasso forcing that, and Jimmy Smith returning it for a touchdown. I mean, that was huge to give the Ravens a 2-touchdown lead before anyone had settled in and finished their first beer at home. So, it was good to see that. And, I mean, this defense, I think one thing that you saw that you can kind of take away moving forward is I thought Dean Pease did a nice job of being a little more creative with blitzes, dialing up some different pressures. I thought they did a nice job using the dime package. One time with Tony Jefferson blitzing for a sack, then we saw Anthony Levine doing that. I want to see Tony Jefferson playing closer to the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's something I want to see on the defensive side. So,
in run support, they did okay against Marshawn.
Yeah.
Right?
But that said, I mean, the defense, it wasn't perfect, but they made plays, but they got a balanced effort. Week 1, it was all about the defense, and the offense basically just had to not screw up. Week 2, the offense did some nice things in the first half. Then second half, it was kind of just run out the clock, so to speak, against a Cleveland team that wasn't going to seriously threaten. So this was the balanced effort that you need to see more often than not. It wasn't unbelievable statistically, but it was very good statistically. It was very efficient. They were good on third down. They were able to take advantage of staying on schedule, using the running game effectively.
Flacco had time. I mean, let's be honest.
Flacco had time. They pushed the ball down the field. I saw some, at one point in the first half, Jeremy Maclin ran an outside comeback route, which was, that was the bread and butter of the Cam Cameron offense when Derek Mason was Joe Flacco's go-to guy. I want to see more of that. It was good to see a little more variation with this offense. So it ended up being very balanced, and it skewed more toward the run. Naturally, in the fourth quarter, when you have a lead, you're going to be running the football.
Well, they had a lead the whole game, though. It was 21-3 at one point, and then they took the air out of the ball in the beginning of the third quarter. They couldn't get anywhere, and we're saying, well, they're being conservative. Well, I don't know with a 2-touchdown lead on the road that you need to go for the jugular at that point or make a mistake if you can run the ball. Now, they couldn't, right? I mean, and they got really bad down in distances, too. I mean, you find them in second and 13 and third and 16. They're not going to win those battles, not on the road.
Yeah. They were too conservative in the third quarter, but then you saw them open it back up. After Oakland scored the touchdown, Of course, E.J. Manuel had that scramble on 3rd and 9 and set up the Lynch score after that. Then you saw the Ravens come back out, and they opened it back up. I think their first 3 plays of that ensuing series were short passes that they were able to convert. And Brashad Perriman caught the 13-yard conversion for a first down. So you saw them open it back up. They ended up getting a field goal out of that. Yeah, it would have been great to score a touchdown there, and you could have really finished them off, but it was enough. It did the trick, and then it really put Oakland behind the 8 ball. And then, from that point, I thought Oakland punting the ball when they were in Baltimore territory with 9 minutes to go. I thought that was very reminiscent of what Marvin Lewis did in the fourth quarter against the Ravens in Week 1. I thought it was just. I didn't think that was a winning formula.
By the way, though, there's one thing about the Ravens with that's special and I think different from probably 29 of the other teams in the league, is that in that field position, in that spot, if you're Del Rio and you don't get it, you're really giving 3 points up because of Tucker's ability to hit a 55-yard field goal, where maybe with other teams you wouldn't think that way, or you wouldn't think in that circumstance to say, well, let's give it one more chance with the defense on the field. Maybe we'll shake the ball loose. This running back, this kid's been fumbling the ball a lot. They have some inexperience there. If that's your thought, that you have a better chance of having a good punt, and that was a lousy punt, by the way, or pinning them in at the 5-yard line and making them work short. I'll hear that, but I do think Tucker is a difference maker from the decision on that play at that point in the game.
Yeah, and you're probably right in that being the thought process, but that's overthinking things way too much. If you're asking me, you got to score points. You can't be worried about the opposition scoring more points at that point when it's a two-possession game. But hey, the Ravens gladly took the ball back, and then they were able to very much get into their 4-minute offense at that point. They were able to eat up, a 6.5-minute drive that resulted in Justin Tucker kicking a field goal anyway. So it was good to see that. I mean, this offense was really good in the first half. Did not run a good 2-minute offense. That was disappointing to see. Was too conservative coming out the first 2 drives of the second half. But beyond that, I mean, what do you really say about this offense that you don't like beyond those few isolated incidents? They didn't really have any penalties. I mean, they were very disciplined in that way. They ran the ball effectively. They moved the chains on 3rd down. I mean, they checked off boxes. I mean, again, would you like to finish off one of those drives that resulted in a field goal with another touchdown? Sure, there's no question about that. They finished 2 of 5 in the red zone. You'd like to convert one more touchdown there, but overall, you'll gladly take what this offense did, especially after looking so inept the last couple weeks. It was really, really encouraging to see that. Like I said, stopped the bleeding quite nicely, and now you've got that game under your belt. You can draw from that to build some confidence and say, hey, we did that against a team that, it's not Oakland, statistically hadn't been a very good defense, but we know they have some talented players, especially up front, and to see the offensive line do what they did, that should really help that group's confidence moving forward, that, hey, you're not going to score 30 points every week, but if you can be guaranteed to score 20 every week, which should be a pretty reasonable goal in today's NFL, then with their defense, that should be a formula that should have this team playing very meaningful games at the end of the season trying to get to the playoffs.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. We're going to be breaking this game down all week long. We've got playoff baseball happening. Ovechkin's going to score like 450 goals this year at this pace. We'll be checking in with Ed Frankvik, but plenty of football ahead as the Ravens now get ready for my birthday week here. Man, I got my birthday week this week. I go into the Dundalk Hall of Fame next week. We have a beautiful new addition to our family that we brought home this week. It's a good October month here as we get going. It certainly gets the blood pumping when the Ravens can go out to Oakland and do what they did on Sunday. Fantastic win for them. You can find anything you miss here this week in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. We're there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Planet Fitness delivers our morning newspaper digitally to you and to your email inbox. That happens at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's free. It's easy. You sign up once. You get it every morning. You'll dig it. There's never any spam in that, and there's never any spam in our WNST text service. That is our best service. Been going on for a decade now. Almost 10,000 of you signed up on the WNST text service. Sign up on the website. It's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Of course, Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday, happily discussing a victory over the Oakland Raiders that I think was a little unlikely. These are the kinds of wins that give you a little extra pep in your step, get the season going, get the tailgate going a little better this weekend when the Chicago Bears come to town. The Bears, and then we got Minnesota, and, we got the short week with Miami. Things are happening around. It's a good October for the Ravens right now at 3-2 and headed home. And, hey, the Steelers lost too, so that's good too. I'm out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. You can always find me nasty at WNST.net. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.